Morning everyone, welcome, thanks for joining me. So another video. Picture this if you can. Picture this if you can. It's 1999, New Year's Eve. Standing on the edge of what was a whole decade of time, and standing at the edge, the gateway, the doorway of a whole new cycle of time moving into the 2000s. So 1999, New Year's Eve, and I'm standing on top of a hilltop, and I'm standing in front of these standing stones known as the dragon stones, and there this huge ceremonial fire, and they're standing in front of this huge vast fire, ceremonial fire. There's this figure standing beyond 6 foot with an oak staff with deep spirals running through this staff. This giant of a man with a long white beard wearing a top hat. Picture that if you can. That was absolutely my New Year's Eve in 1999, and I had just met an incredible man by the name of Mcbeth, who I had the honour, privilege, the gift to then spend a year and a day under a form of apprenticeship. You know, he was a mentor, he was a guide, he was beyond a teacher. Teacher is not the right word for people of that ilk. And I was hands-on studying the world of the druid shaman, and we were gifted the most incredible experiences from whoa, the wind. Let me just sort that out. That was the wind showing itself. We're gifted these most incredible experiences. From understanding Vision Quest to Sweat Lodge to a Death of Self ceremony, where we actually dug a hole a few feet down into the ground and then went into that space at sunset, and then come out at sunrise. You know, same with the Sweat Lodge. You know, one of the most incredible experiences I remember was moving into the lodge at midsummer at sunset, and then coming out of the lodge at sunrise. You know, birth of a whole new day with the intention of a whole new beginning. You know, it was endings and beginnings, and I even had this innate ability to really shift people. And you know, what I take from all that, all these years later, is that the people that were on that journey were really hungry for change. They were raw. It was very, very real. It was gritty. And when you're that kind of, you know, thrown open by the experiences you've gone through, there's a rawness and a realness and a hunger for change. And that, to me, you know, it was a seed that was planted all those years back that really become a fundamental, innate, absolute important thing to the work that I do today. It's all about moving people forwards, and it's transition, and it's deep transformation. It's beyond just, you know, passing on a message, you know, and those things really run very deeply with me, you know. And some of the stories I'm going to share with you now really kind of drive home the ability that he had to really magically charge space and influence change in a very deep, fundamental way. One of the memories I have was that he was saying to me that, you know, he would have these kind of moments where he would be inspired to go somewhere, and one of these times was, you know, picture this if you can, he's up in Surrey, he's living in the up beside the Dragonstones in a yurt that he had built himself, and he gets this kind of inspired feeling to head off down to St Michael's Mount, down in the West Country, down in Cornwall in Penzance, and he just gets this feeling that it's time to go. So he says what he would do. He know that he was going to go. On the morning of leaving, he would ceremonially cast a circle, grab his wand, cast that circle, and then invite the spirit of the road to bless his journey and bestow good fortune and bestow a rite of passage and a safe and swift journey. And he would cast this circle up within the standing stones. He would leave an offering, and he would pick up his pack and he would wander to the lane, and the lane would reach the main road, and he would stick out his thumb. And he said 9 out of 10 times after doing the ceremony and ritual, he would get to the end of the lane, get out to the main road, 15 minutes or so, and he'd pick up a lift, because he had hitchhiked, and you're talking a few hundred miles. And he'd done this. He cast his circle with his wand in his Dragonstones. He would walk down the lane, he'd get to the main road, stick out of his thumb, and this particular time he had this lorry hauling a lot of cargo. I think it was stone actually, which, think about that for a moment, that's a good omen and a good sign, especially him being a stone circle builder. Lorry pulls in, the guy shouts out the cab in a West Country accent, I don't know where you're wanting to go, but I'm heading out towards Penzance, if that is any good for you. Incredible, you know, absolutely is. He would jump in the wagon, and he says, you know, he would always buy them breakfast or lunch, depending what time and depending where they stopped, and it was his way of saying thank you. And he would get down to the West Country, he'd get down to Penzance, and he would either that day or the next day would get up onto St Michael's Mount, which is a very, very special place, incredibly special place. You know, you could go there for a day, but he would almost become invisible and get into the fabric of the place, and quite often would hold an overnight vigil undetected on the island, and then come off of it the next day with a big smile on his face, saying, you know, the land, these places belong to the people. You know, so, you know, these stories, you know, I really remember with a warm heart, and they have lived on and touched me and inspired me in the most profoundest ways. Another one, picture this, it's winter solstice, and he gets this feeling and calling, this appointment with the land, to go to a cave in the Welsh mountains that he had heard through stories and tales that holds some quartz crystal. And he was on a journey that you can read about, actually. If you put Ivan Mcbeth and the Crystal Journey, you'll find it on the internet, on Google. And he was planting these quartz crystals in stone circles, and stone circles that he was building up and down the country, and then it went overseas. In the last few years he's passed on to spirit, and he spent his last years of his life in New Zealand on a farmstead with his partner Fern, and they'd cultivated this land and they built this stone circle. Incredible place by all accounts. But he gets this nudge to go to this cave up in the Welsh mountains, and he gets the nudge to leave on winter solstice, so he does. And he goes down into this cave, goes deep down, and he finds these quartz crystals in this pool of water, and he brings them out and leaves a gift of thanks and gratitude. And the intention is that these crystals will now be planted within stone circles up and down the country and wherever he goes. And the intention was creating a network of light, which is absolutely him. Wherever he went, he was leaving some light. And he leaves the mountains, and he heads back into civilization. And picture this, it's a very kind of dark day, and it's been raining non-stop, and he comes off this mountain track that leads onto a drover's track that leads onto a small kind of asphalt road that goes onto a little tarmac road that ends up towards a village. And as he looks, there's a tavern, there's an inn, and there in the window is some candles burning, and he thoughts to himself, it's such a welcoming sight. And he taps on the door and looks in through the window and thinks, very quiet, very unusual. Taps again on the door, and this gentleman opens the door and welcomes him, and he says, Ivan says, he says, I've been up in the mountains for the last several days, and I would really welcome a pot of tea if it's at all possible, landlord. And the gentleman says, of course, and he's drenched with rain. And he says, and a wash, if that's okay, if you've got somewhere I can clean myself up, I'd really appreciate that, and then I'll be on my way. The gentleman smiles and says, of course. Welcomes him in. They walk through the pub, walk into this space, and Ivan looks, there's this whole table of people, and this table of food, a whole array of food sitting at this table, and the gentleman says to him, please do take a seat. And he sits down and he introduces him to his family, and the family welcome him and introduce themselves. And suddenly Ivan realises that actually it's Christmas Day. And he spent that day with this wonderful family that had taken him in, given him shelter from that storm and made him very much at home. And he spent the day with them, and they shared stories and tales. He said he watched some TV, even fell asleep for a while, and it was a beautiful experience. He met them as strangers and he left as friends, and those stories are just so beautiful. And I think we're living in a time that less stories are being told, and actually stories are so important for transformation and healing. I think that there are generations now that are moving forwards that are less telling stories because they're not living those stories, and I think those stories to be lived are really, really important, and then to be shared are equally as important. So as I said, January, I'm going to share with you some of the characters that have influenced me along the way, and that's a little bit about Ivan, just a little bit about Ivan, and some of the stories that I remember. Still to this day, he's been past a little while now, but still to this day, those stories live on here in this world, and his energy, his heart, his light very much lives on in this world. So it's been a huge beginning to 220, and you remember, some of you may remember that I said at the beginning of 220 there on the dawn of the 1st of January, I wake up and I light a candle, and I stand there at my front door with the intention of magic men, the candle burn, blow out the old, blow in the new, blow out the false, blow in the true. By the powers of 3 times 3, this is my will, so may it be. Which is kind of setting this whole intention to move forward, and these are some of the things that have gone in very, very deeply from all that time ago. The magically charging space, intention, being conscious, us moving into 2000s consciously was such a gift, and then the year and the day that followed, and here we are, 2020, a whole new decade. And I cleared out a whole load of physical things, of records and clothing, and made sure it all went to a good cause and charity shop. And I can remember thinking to myself, over these last couple of years, I want to use more things in my world that have a little bit more meaning or purpose. And when it comes to my outdoor clothing, things that are more natural. You can't beat natural fibres. They keep you warm, they keep you dry if you treat them the right way. They live on, you can maintain them, you can repair them. And there I was handing all this stuff over, and I looked, and there was this smock that actually I picked up some time ago, and I waxed it. It then becomes firm and it becomes waterproof. I personalised it with the tree of life, and it keeps me warm and dry, but it's going to live on. It's going to be hard wearing, and I bought it for a fraction of the price. But in the last month, it's come into its own, and it had been sitting there for a little while, and as all the old went, it showed itself, it revealed itself from the back of the cupboard, and it now lives at the front of the cupboard with not too much in there, so it has a use. And all those things that we have in our world, but are we using them? Do we appreciate them? Do they bring us joy? And I remember, going back into that shop, handing another lot of stuff. It's layers and of stuff that goes, and looking and thinking to myself, I could do now with an everyday winter jacket, and there sat there a modern version of the old US Army Parker that reminded me of my younger years. But they're really hard wearing, they're great winter jackets. They're warm, and this one was a modern version of that. It looked as if it would have been, but it was a modern version of, and get this, it was waxed, so it's waterproof and it's really, really warm. Beautiful things. And the other wonderful little share with you is that every Sunday morning, me and the little guy put a tray of pan of chocolate in the oven for breakfast, and then we share them with any friends that drop in, any neighbours that pass by, and we share them for breakfast. And it's something we've done for a very long time now. And a couple of days ago, by chance, I come across this incredible channel on YouTube called Elliot Homestead. Wonderful channel, and everything they do is very soulful. And they grow their food, and their kind of approaches to the land and the home has a soul, and I absolutely really relate to that. I thought it was really beautiful. Well, one of the things I saw this lovely lady do was, for her husband and her children, was to make them chocolate croissants. And I didn't realise how kind of simple. She showed it in a very simple way. They were really simple, but they were beautiful. So what did we do this morning? We made these together. We made these chocolate croissants. And they were really, really simple, and my gosh, you cannot come back from that after these, filling the kitchen with that most wonderful smell and tasting absolutely divine. I cannot go back to shop brought ever again. And the beautiful thing about it was it took no time at all, and it's of heart, and it was really, really simple to do. It's those little things and those little changes that we make that really lead into the bigger changes, and it's something that you can do together, and it's something that's really, really soulful. So I will leave a link to that video that I discovered that in as well. But it is all those little changes equal the larger and bigger change. And I think that actually, as we move forwards into this decade, I think home is going to become and places and spaces are going to become more important to us. I think they always have been, but I think we've forgotten, or maybe we're too busy and we kind of in a way neglect them, or we pass through them. But I think it's about connecting with them, you know, allowing yourself to connect with those places, and nourishing them, and in turn they nourish you, you know, rather than, you know, just kind of move through everything. You know, why was I buying trays worth of shop bought pan of chocolates and croissants? Is because I didn't know how to make them, and also it's convenient. And I think that as we go forward, you know, our connection to home and place and each other is going to become more important. Anyway, there's a few thoughts. I'm down at the Boffey, and the last thing is, looking as I looked across, is the last few days we've planted a whole hedge full of blackcurrant canes that were cutting from my dad's, and we planted them in the ground, and they're going to make a, all being well, they're going to make a hedge, and not this summer but next there'll be an abundance for jam and wines, and blackcurrant juice as well, cordials, which would be absolutely beautiful. And as my dear neighbour, I bumped into a couple of wonderful people down here today. The young beekeeper, I bumped into her good self, and my neighbour opposite as well, who's just full of wisdom and knowledge, and she'd lean there and share on her hoe and share all that wisdom and knowledge. And she said, you know, it's fantastic to see those blackcurrant canes going on the edge of the plot and the strip that we're going to cultivate for wildflowers to feed the bees. And she said, you know, the beautiful thing about all those canes is the alternative would have been that they would have ended up on a fire, and actually in the ground, you know, and that's wisdom that's been shared from my dad and his dad. Wonderful things, guys. I'm going to wish you the most wonderful day, and if you're still listening, thank you for your company, and see you next time.